You're listening to Procurement 6, the weekly podcast from the team at Art of Procurement that summarizes this week in procurement in just 6 short segments.
Hi there, I'm Kelly Barner, and today is Friday, November 25th, 2022.
6.
First of all, happy Thanksgiving. Now don't worry, I pre-recorded this episode, so I can assure you that as you're listening, I'm happily only halfway out of my turkey coma. Now, as we open this edition of the Procurement 6, I have a favor to ask. An article that I wrote for Art of Procurement earlier this year, focused on the underlying causes of the baby formula crisis, is now a finalist for a Supply Chain Brief MVP award in the Supply Chain Management category. There's a link in the show notes, and I would appreciate it if you would take a moment in the next few days to give us your vote. I'm also going to link to the article itself so you can read it. This is a news story that's particularly interesting for procurement and supply chain professionals because many of the trends and dynamics that we work with on a regular basis played a role in making this crisis worse. Now, you'll be interested to find out some of the underlying causes, as well as to discover that very little has actually been improved.
5.
This week's podcast features Joe Payne and Jennifer Ulrich from Coursecentric talking about the Great Resignation. Remember the Great Resignation? 2 or 3 months ago, it was all we talked about. Now we're more focused on layoffs. It is incredible how fast things change. Now that said, I have to admit something. Joe was right. Okay, I said it. I'm glad to have that off my chest. I'll have Brittany on our team clip that part out so Joe can put it on a loop or maybe use it as his ringtone. So let's listen in to how he actually talks about the overall employment trend that the Great Resignation was just one part of.
Joe, how about you? How have you been impacted by the Great Resignation?
I mean, we're seeing it everywhere, and personally, I've seen a lot of good friends and coworkers moving jobs at our customers, specifically and in particular in procurement, but not limited to procurement by any means. There's been a lot of folks that have moved positions, change jobs, change career paths. And, look, I call it the Great Reshuffling more so than the Great Resignation. And in some ways, it almost feels like we're just passing cards around. And what I mean by that is, within Coursecentric, we may lose someone to one of our competitors, and then we pick someone up from the same competitor. And I see that in industry as well, where someone who was our sponsor at one customer has moved to another company, and they've traded places and moved around. And that's the reality. The reality is, look, what COVID has brought is it created an environment where location is not a factor in what you want to do with your career, right? Like, it opens up doors, a lot of doors that were previously locked. And the other piece of it is the scarcity of talent has substantially increased wages for people moving positions. And so those two factors have made people rethink things that maybe 2 years ago they just never would have rethought. So we're seeing it all the time. I'd like to say that maybe it's slowing down a little bit, but I'm really not sure it has. It might just be kind of a summer lull in hiring and recruiting. But yeah, I imagine it's going to continue for quite a while. And in this new world where the job opportunities are not regionally or locally based, it's probably going to be a few years before we see it slow down.
What Joe pointed out there is important. If we just focus on one piece of a bigger trend, the resignations, we completely miss the overall picture. Sure, a lot of people decided to resign their jobs in favor of new positions or taking a spin on the wheel of entrepreneurship. But employers are making changes as well. It is going to be hard to fully understand all of the forces at play until the employment market cools down. But in the short term, it is wise to zoom out a bit and consider all of the relevant trends and factors. If you would like to hear Joe and Jennifer's whole conversation with Philip Eidson, then you have two choices. You can listen to this week's episode of the Art of Procurement podcast, or you can watch the event on demand from our site. Both links are available on today's episode page.
4.
Speaking of resources on the Art of Procurement website, we recently published a written summary of Mastermind Live 2022. Our current focus is the mission to 10x the impact of procurement, and that also happened to be the central theme for Mastermind Live 2022, our flagship virtual event. For 2 days, we heard from procurement leaders, transformation experts, finance professionals, entrepreneurs, and innovators. Everyone had a unique and valuable perspective to share. We just released a full event recap as well. In this 12-page guide, you will find session overviews and speaker information, thought-provoking quotes, and plenty of inspiration to get you ready for next year. You can download your copy by going to artofprocurement.com/resources or by clicking the link in today's show notes.
This is Procurement 6 from Art of Procurement. To get notified every time an episode is published, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe. 3.
I'm sure many people are traveling this holiday season, some by air. We recently covered the key price drivers for domestic air travel thanks to insights from our friends at Procurement IQ. Domestic airlines have high operating costs at 55.5%, and most of that goes to labor and fuel. Not only are those expensive things, they're also volatile. So the more category insight procurement has access to, the better. Now here's some good news. Because leisure travelers use the same air travel services and sites as business travelers, there is a ton of transparency. Procurement can absolutely benefit from that. And some insight. Procurement IQ has currently rated domestic air travel as a buy now category, even though the leverage is currently more in the supplier's favor than the buyer's. That's expected to get a little bit worse going forward. For more information on this category, check out my recent article on the Art of Procurement homepage or linked in the show notes.
2.
In last week's episode of Dial P for Procurement, I looked into the cost and supply dynamics causing concern in the energy markets associated with home heating. One thing I was surprised to find was the role that auctions play in electricity costs, at least in New England. On December 6th, there will be a 4-hour auction during which suppliers can post their rates, and Eversource, that's the top electric utility in New England, well, they will have to decide which contracts to sign based on anticipated demand. That auction will set the electric rates customers pay between February and August of 2023. There are already concerns about a shortage of supply, and that means rates are likely to go up. Those rate increases are a direct pass-through to consumers. As many auctions as I imagine we've all run, few of us have conducted events with those kind of stakes, especially when you think about households on a fixed budget. To hear more, listen to Dial P wherever you get your podcasts or using the episode link in today's show notes.
1.
We've officially wrapped our events for 2022, and as satisfying as that is to say, I can't believe the year's really coming to an end. 2022 was an absolute blur. But don't worry, we're already working on multiple virtual events and AOP live sessions for 2023. If you want to make sure you know all about them as soon as they are open for registration, please subscribe to the Art of Procurement mailing list. You can find that at artofprocurement.com/subscribe.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. If you've enjoyed this pod, help us grow and tell your peers to search for Procurement 6 wherever they get their podcasts.